under the assumption that there is no standard.
The world is not black and white. There's no good or bad.
So your philosophy is just focus more on yourself. You're not so concerned about what other people think.
My brother in Christ, how are you doing, Matthew?
I'm doing well. Honored to be ready to share some of my perspectives from on the street.
Yes, definitely. So, what was? Can you talk a little bit about your experience and before we go over the questions? Most of the people that we've talked to, college students. Can you talk a little bit about your experience before we delve into the questions that we went over?
Oh, absolutely. Overall, it was a really good experience. I haven't done something like that before, and to be able to interact with college students was encouraging to me. And one of the things that was a point of optimism for me was, as you mentioned, a very diverse beliefs from student to student that we talked with, and I absolutely noticed the contrast between their belief systems and presumably their parents' belief systems, and how from generation to generation we see a more progressive and a supposed inclusive mindset that is deviates significantly from a more traditional Bible-based worldview. So if that's where it ends, then that would be discouraging, but I'm optimistic because in order for a realignment of belief and practice to a more of a traditional and biblical way of thinking, you have to first be open and honest about where you're coming from. And that's something that I found refreshing. I know when I was a college student many blue moons ago, there was that openness and sense of, you might not agree with where I'm coming from, but this is where I'm coming from. But I think where our society is at now, there seems to be even more a willingness for people to speak their mind and not to be afraid of what other people might think about them when they say, well, this is what I believe, this is what I think, this is what I'm about. So the first step for there to be any dialogue that has a chance for transformation, there has to first be that openness and honesty. So I saw that in my time on the street. So that's why I view that as a reason for optimism.
I think if you take a step back and look at deeds, sort of like a person's actions.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you sort of take a step back, independent of all the things going on in their mind, I think you can find a right path and a wrong path. But because our minds have so much going on in there, that I think a right and wrong within a person can be very subjective.
I think there's a lot of moral gray that's sort of interspliced between the two, right and wrong. I mean, so I don't really think having there strictly there being one or the other is really valid in my eyes.
Happiness or success is defined by individuals, and therefore it'd be subjective opposed to objective.
I would define success as something defined on an individual basis. So success is something different for everybody. So success for me means achieving my goals. What are my goals? To, have a happy, loving family, to, live comfortably but not, strive for means that I don't need. To be a part of a community, to help others. That would be success to me.
I think to put myself in a position where I can wake up every day and have a smile on my face, whether that's because of friends or because of the job I'm doing or the location that I am geographically. I think it's just waking up and just having a smile.
The sense that I got is there's been a shift just in the last 10, 15 years from when I was in college and this current generation of college students, from more of a me from an other-centered vantage point to more of a me-centered vantage point. And I think that has to do with the way that our culture generally believes. Our parents and our grandparents, there was very much a Judeo-Christian foundation to our country was evident, and there was a genuine there was a form of believing the Bible as a framework for the way that we think about life and the way that we live. So with one God in your thinking, then success is going to be in relationship to Him. He's going to define what success is. And then if you remove God from your thinking, then there's the only place where success can be defined is either in relationship to yourself or your relationship with other people. So just that transition from there is an objective outside of ourselves, external, unchanging source and definition and source of success, versus now there's only a changing and internally defined definition of success. It's not as rooted, it's not as grounded and firm of a definition as in past generations in this country, such as our parents and our grandparents. So I saw that such a simple question in one sense. How do you define success? Mm-hmm. But if the parts of your worldview are different, then your definition of success is going to change with the addition of or subtraction of different pieces of your thinking. So making that correlation is something that I observed. So when we talk about evil, a common understanding is that evil only happens to bad people. So the idea being good people receive good things for the good that they do, and bad people receive bad things or evil things for the bad that they do. That's actually an Eastern idea. We call it karma. But that actually differs from the biblical understanding of suffering, because suffering is the result of sin, and
fallen world, yeah.
And all of us are sinners.
Yes.
So the Bible doesn't think so much in terms of good people versus bad people, but as sinners and redeemed sinners, or we might say sinners and saints who are sinners saved by grace. So evil and the suffering that we experience isn't so much based directly on an individual in their actions, but rather is something that was not part of God's original design and intention for this creation. He created all things. He created them all to be good. He says in Genesis 1, after he finished on the sixth day of creation, that everything is good and very good, in fact. But the reason why there's evil and suffering in the world is because of the fall that we read about in Genesis 3, where Adam and Eve in paradise, perfect themselves in relationship with God and with each other and with all of creation, they saw the opportunity in the fruit of the tree to find something more, what they thought was more desirable than what God was offering them, and they took that. They listened to that temptation that Satan gave them. They took that, and then God, to show the ugliness of disobedience toward Him, or we call sin, He cursed all of creation, which would include us, and as a result, there's evil in the world, and that evil and suffering, that evil affects us, and when that evil affects us, we experience that as suffering. So when we talk about suffering and evil without God in the picture, there isn't any hope. there isn't any way of escape, because the best you can do without a good God who loves you, if that's not in the picture, if that's not an alternative for you, an option, then you have to deal with suffering with your own resources, or with some sort of collective resources that you find from maybe family members or organizations that you're a part of. But in the end, it's you are the one who has to synthesize whatever source that you're looking to for comfort and perspective, and make it work for yourself. And you're suffering, so that's not a very hopeful thing for you to try to figure out how to comfort yourself when you are not experiencing comfort. But with God in the picture, you look to Him for comfort. And when you find that comfort in God, that external, objective, never-changing source, regardless of our experience, there is a way of hope. There is a way out. There is a brighter tomorrow, because you're not trying to create it yourself. You're just simply connecting, reaching out, and receiving what's out there for you to have. And that's where the gospel comes in, and we can talk more about that.
I was raised in the church. My mom was a single parent when she had me, and she, put me in the church. I grew up in a big church, and that was my family. And so between that and scouting, I just, I got to experience a lot of volunteer opportunities, what it's like to be a part of a really great community that's supportive of one another, and that pretty much that is what I'm striving to get to again. Well, I stopped going back when I started college back in 2011, and I was already having my own sort of inner turmoil about my church. I am from a city that has a lot of poverty. The high school I went to, the middle school I went to, they were not the best institutions, but the church I went to was pretty extravagant. It had a lot of money, a lot of financial support, and it just was something that I wrestled with and just couldn't get past. All of this money being put into this building, and people going on trips, which oftentimes there was a volunteer aspect, but retreats and things to places that weren't super modest. All of that just really it bothered me. There was a disconnect there between what I read in scripture and what I was seeing and practiced. So since then, we've actually my off-camera partner and I have talked about looking into a church at some point, because we see the merits of being involved in a community like that.
Well, it's been my pleasure, and I really enjoy our time together as well. It's mutual, and I'm glad to hear that Lord willing, there'll be a second season, and I'll be able to get back out there on the street and ask questions again and interact with these young men and young women who have so much potential and so much life ahead of them. So I'm looking forward to it, and thank you for the gracious invitation to come back and do this all again.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, God bless you, my man.
God bless you too, Jackson.